Imagine accepting a new job and gradually realizing that your own boss is plotting against you, laughing at your struggles. That's what happened to Sarah, a young deaf woman determined to prove her worth. But when the cameras revealed the truth, everything changed. Want to know the outcome? Subscribe, like, and leave a comment about what you think of this emotional story. When I accepted the job at the convenience store, I had the feeling that it was the chance I needed to turn my life around. I had already been through a few jobs, but nothing that really made me feel like I was going anywhere. This job wasn't glamorous, not even close, but it was a start. A start that, for someone like me who is deaf, meant proving I could do anything. As soon as I walked through the door, the smell of fresh coffee and neatly arranged products filled my nose. The store had that commonplace vibe, yet at the same time full of possibilities. The floor was shining, the counter was spotless, and the shelves were organized. I smiled to myself, thinking that here I could find a little peace and stability. The manager, Tom, was the one who greeted me. He had that forced smile, as if trying to be friendly but without much enthusiasm. "So, you're the deaf girl, right?" was what he said as soon as he saw me, straightforwardly. The way he spoke made me swallow hard. It was a mix of curiosity with something I couldn't quite identify at the time. I didn't want to pay much attention to it, but I couldn't help noticing his gaze, as if he was trying to find a flaw, a visible defect. I nodded and smiled. It wasn't the first time someone reacted that way upon finding out I was deaf, but still, something about Tom made me feel that he wasn't just curious. He seemed to want to test me in some way. "Let's do this, Sarah. Here it's simple. Organize the stock, assist the customers, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask," he said, handing me a sheet with the tasks for the day. His voice had a mechanical tone, almost as if he were speaking to a machine rather than to a person. I knew what to do. I was used to these dynamics. The problem wasn't the work itself, but the fact that I always had to prove my worth to others. The first week passed quickly. There were no major surprises, but I already felt that Tom was watching me more than necessary. He always seemed to be at a distance, paying attention to every move I made. When something wasn't in place, he'd say, "You know that organization is important, right?" I knew. And I also knew that he was trying to make me doubt my competence. I dealt with this constantly, in small daily actions. But what bothered me the most was that he never spoke directly about my deafness. Everything seemed to be a hint. The next shift was a little more difficult. I had a routine meeting with Rachel, a friend who worked as a career consultant, and the things she said kept ringing in my head. "You have to be firmer, Sarah," she told me over the phone. "Otherwise, they'll end up underestimating you." This was something I had always struggled with. Every day at work, I felt like I needed to be more and more than just good. I had to be perfect. And deep down, something told me that Tom was waiting for a mistake. In the second week, a simple yet symbolic event happened. I was in the stockroom adjusting the arrangement of the shelves when I noticed some products had been moved around. I didn't mind much at first, but when I saw the same thing happen for the third time, I realized it wasn't a coincidence. Someone was messing with my things, and although it wasn't a big difference, something in my stomach tightened. I knew this could affect my performance and, consequently, my chance of staying at the store. However, the biggest surprise came when Tom appeared in the stockroom. "You're a bit slow, Sarah. I think you should be quicker," he said. The way he watched me made my stomach turn. It was clear that he wasn't just talking about my work but about me. He had never made a direct comment about my deafness, but there was always a way to insinuate that I wasn't enough. He knew this affected me and he was taking advantage of it. I took a deep breath, kept my focus and got back to work, but deep down I knew something was wrong. It was as if Tom was playing a game, trying to make me doubt my abilities. I wasn't just organizing shelves and assisting customers. I was trying to hold my ground against a series of silent, cruel tests. At the end of the day, with the store closing and the other employees already leaving, I stayed behind to finish the stockroom tasks. When I finally left, Tom stopped me at the door. "If you keep going like this, you'll make it. But only if you show that you really want to be here," he said, as if he were giving me a chance, like it was a reward. I knew he wanted me to think he was doing me a favor, but in reality he was testing me to see how much I could handle. I didn't know it yet, but something inside me told me he was playing a much dirtier game than I had imagined. Anyway, I wasn't willing to be the victim of this story. I had goals, and as always, nothing, neither Tom nor the obstacles, was going to stop me from reaching them. The war had only just begun. The routine at work started to settle, but something was definitely off. I tried to ignore the small irritations, focusing on what really mattered, the experience. However, over the weeks, I began to notice patterns I couldn't overlook anymore. It was as if the universe was testing me, and deep down, I knew Tom was in some kind of competition with me, a silent but palpable competition. At first, I talked little about my deafness. I preferred people to see me as an ordinary professional, without highlighting my disability. However, the lack of direct communication started to become a challenge. When a customer asked a question and I couldn't hear it, I would just read their lips and try to help with as much attention as possible. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. The problem was when, instead of asking again, Tom would come over and, with a somewhat disdainful smile, say, "I think the customer already left, didn't you notice?" He spoke as if the responsibility to attend to others was solely and exclusively mine. "They come here to buy, not to make friends," he would add, always with that tone that made me feel even more isolated. Sometimes I wondered if he was just joking or if he really wanted to provoke me, but deep down, the insecurity was there, like a shadow, always telling me I wasn't doing enough. I never let myself be discouraged. My eyes were always focused on my work, jotting down everything in my notebook and organizing the stock with a precision that even impressed me. I concentrated on what I could control, what was under my responsibility. I couldn't afford to be distracted because any mistake would give Tom another reason to criticize me. On one particularly busy day, something strange happened. While I was in the stockroom restocking products, I noticed one of the rice bags was torn. Immediately, I grabbed a box to repackage it and prevent the contents from spilling on the floor, but when I returned to the counter, I realized the quantity of goods was off. I was sure I had checked everything correctly. The mistake wasn't on my part, but somewhere between the shelves and the stockroom. Something was out of place. Later, when reviewing the security cameras, I saw something that made me stop. When Tom came to inspect the store and looked directly at the shelf, I saw him quickly move away from the spot where I was. When I looked back at the footage, I noticed he had tampered with some items, pushing the rice and leaving the mess for me to find later. It wasn't just a mistake. Tom was deliberately trying to put me in a vulnerable position. I couldn't understand it, but something inside me knew he was doing this to watch me fail. And for him, that seemed to be the fun. I didn't say anything to anyone. Instead, I focused on fixing the situation. I knew I couldn't get angry or react with desperation. That would just make me another victim in Tom's game. I took a deep breath and kept working. But inside, something was changing. I was starting to realize that deep down, Tom didn't see me as an employee but as a game. He thought he could push me toward failure, that he could bring me down. And by doing that, he was messing with something much deeper in me, my dignity and my willpower. "You need to be faster, Sarah," he said one of these days. I already knew what that meant, what he was really trying to say. He never talked about my deafness directly, but it was obvious he saw my disability as one more obstacle. As if that was the reason I wasn't fast enough, as if everything was just an excuse. Every comment from him sounded like a veiled criticism. But instead of falling into the temptation to justify myself, I just watched him, smiled, and went back to my work. The pressure was beginning to weigh on me. Every day felt like a constant test, and I knew Tom was watching every move I made, waiting for the moment to bring me down. However, the hardest part wasn't the external pressure. It was the internal struggle. I was tired of constantly having to prove that I was capable, that there were no limits to what I could do. I was tired of fighting against something invisible that others seemed to see but couldn't name. The deafness wasn't my problem. The problem was how people like Tom reacted to it. I didn't know how much longer I could keep dealing with this without exploding. No matter how much I focused on my work and tried to be the best I could be, I felt like Tom was forcing me to define myself by his expectations, by his limited view of who I am. But at the same time, one thing became clear to me: I would no longer just be a piece in his game. He was playing with fire, and deep down, I knew it wouldn't end well for him. On one of the toughest nights, while organizing the stock alone and reflecting on everything that had been happening, I received a message from Rachel. You need to stop being so hard on yourself, Sarah. You're amazing just the way you are." These words, so simple and direct, brought me a sense of calm, as if for a brief moment, I had found an anchor. I knew I had to keep going, that my determination was stronger than Tom's moves. I was ready to fight for myself. It didn't matter what he wanted. I had my own goals and, above all, my dignity. The atmosphere in the store was tense, as if the air was charged with electricity that I could feel but not see. I knew Tom was preparing something, a move that, somehow, would put me in a vulnerable position. He didn't speak directly about my deafness, but his behavior made it clear that he thought it was something to shame me for, a weakness to be exploited. I couldn't let that happen. But the problem was, I didn't know where to start. The day everything began to change was an ordinary day to some extent. The store was busy as usual and I was doing my afternoon shift. The flow of customers was more intense than usual, and I was running back and forth trying to handle the demands, organize the stock, and attend to customers. Deep down, I knew Tom was watching, just like always. Every time I got distracted or made a small mistake, he was there with that critical look, ready to make a comment. But that day, something happened that made me realize I wasn't alone. Or at least I wasn't anymore. Lena, one of the oldest employees in the store, approached me when Tom went for lunch. She had that kind of calm, secure presence that gave me a sense of relief. Lena had never been a close friend, but she always seemed to understand the challenges I faced without drawing attention to them. Maybe that's why when she approached me I was surprised. "I know what he's doing to you," she said, lowering her voice. Her tone was soft but firm. I looked at her, trying to understand, not knowing how to react. Tom was so focused on testing me, pushing me to my limits, that I thought no one else was noticing. "Are you referring to Tom?" I asked, still hesitant. She nodded and made a subtle gesture with her head, signaling that no one else was around. "He does this with everyone, Sarah," Lena continued, her expression serious. "But with you he's going too far. He doesn't like to see people like you taking the place of someone he thinks should be here. He thinks it's funny to watch you struggle." These words hit me with unexpected force. I didn't know what to think. What Lena was telling me wasn't something I didn't already know deep down, but hearing it from someone else, someone who seemed to perceive more than I realized, changed something inside me. Until that moment, I believed I was alone, dealing with Tom's actions in isolation. But now, it seemed like the truth was coming to light. It wasn't just me being watched, tested. There was an intention behind it. "You don't have to deal with this alone," Lena said, looking at me with more empathy than I expected. "I've seen this happen before. He likes to see people fail, but it can't be like this. I know you're doing your best, and that's what matters. You can count on me." It was the first time I felt that someone truly understood the situation. Lena wasn't just supporting me, she was offering me a chance to defend myself, not to be just a pawn in a dirty game. She suggested that, instead of ignoring the mistakes and failures Tom was fabricating, I should start documenting them. It wasn't about creating a direct confrontation, but about protecting myself in a silent, yet effective way. "He will make a mistake at some point, and when that happens you'll be ready. Don't let him fool you," she said. I didn't know what to expect from this advice. But, in that moment, it was clear that Lena wanted something more for me than just getting through the workdays. She wanted me to stand up for myself, to take control of my situation. This not only gave me strength but also made me see things differently. I wasn't the victim here. I could be stronger. In the following days, I took Lena's advice seriously. Every time Tom made an indirect remark or when he moved something to put me in an uncomfortable position, I started taking notes. Every little detail. Nothing exaggerated, just enough to remember what was happening and when. I didn't know exactly what I would do with this information, but the idea of being prepared gave me a sense of control, something I hadn't had until then. The tension increased as I continued to carry out my daily tasks with more attention and diligence. The interactions with Tom became increasingly uncomfortable, but I already knew what to expect from him. Every time he tried to provoke me, I became calmer, more focused. I was preparing for what would come next, not knowing exactly when the moment to confront him would come. I knew the opportunity would come, eventually. And as expected, the turning point happened on a normal workday. I was restocking products on the shelf when I saw Tom approaching quickly. The look on his face was the usual one, but there was something more. He seemed impatient, as if he were looking for something to criticize. When he saw me, his expression softened a little, but he couldn't hide what was on his mind. He started to speak, but his words were sharper than I expected. "I gave you a chance, Sarah. I don't know how long you'll be able to keep going with this lack of attention." The way he said it, without even trying to hide the disdain, made me realize he was testing the final boundary. He wanted to force a reaction, but I was already prepared. I looked at him, took a deep breath, and simply said, "I am competent, Tom. And if you can't see that, it's not my problem." The surprise in his eyes was visible. He probably didn't expect me to be direct, to be so assertive. But, contrary to what he thought, I was no longer at the mercy of his games. The unexpected alliance with Lena, her support, had given me courage. I wasn't alone. I didn't need to hide behind fear or insecurity. And, in that moment, I felt I had taken the first step toward regaining control over my life, and over my career in the store. The following days were a mix of adrenaline and strategic calm. Tom seemed to realize something was different in me, but he couldn't pinpoint what was really changing. He didn't know that I was stronger, more prepared. Every time he tried to destabilize me, I remained focused, not giving him the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. I knew I couldn't hide in the shadows of his cruelty anymore. The moment of confrontation was approaching, and I felt the tension was about to explode. I couldn't wait to act. It was a Thursday afternoon that ended up becoming the turning point. The store was a little quieter than usual, with fewer customers. I was organizing the stock when I saw Tom approach, his usual smile on his face. I knew what he wanted, and, despite trying to remain impassive, something inside me was beginning to boil. He didn't know it, but I was about to turn the tables. "Sarah, I need you to redo this section of products. I think you're not paying attention to the details again," he said, his tone almost dismissive. The word details came out of his mouth like an accusation, as if my ability to work was a joke. What he didn't know was that I had already noticed something that would change everything. Something that, if exposed, would make him lose all credibility. Instead of responding, I continued doing what I was doing. I wasn't going to fall for his provocations, not anymore. But when he walked away, I went to the security camera system. There, where he least expected me to look, was what I was searching for. A recording from a few days ago. I knew it was the right moment to act. In the footage, Tom could be seen clearly messing with the products on the shelf in a suspicious manner. It wasn't just a simple rearrangement. He was deliberately taking items out of place and placing them in strategic positions to create flaws in my organization. Then, when he caught me making the mistake, he would come with that superior tone, pretending he was correcting me. It was a well-thought-out strategy, but what he didn't know was that I had it all recorded. Not only the footage, but also the moments when he messed with the products. Everything was documented. The moment of confrontation wasn't something I planned, but it was something that happened naturally. When Tom passed by me again, approaching with that look of someone who already knew he had the upper hand, I stared at him. He looked back, but his smile faded when he saw the confidence in my eyes. He didn't expect me to have something on him. "Tom," I started, my voice firm but controlled. He stopped and looked at me, his eyes suspicious. "I know what you're doing." He tried to laugh as if it were just another desperate attempt on my part, but I continued. "There's no turning back now. I saw what you did on the cameras. I know exactly how you manipulated the products and put them back in a way that made me look incompetent." His expression changed instantly. He tried to maintain composure, but I could see that he was starting to get nervous. The words got stuck in his throat for a moment until he finally managed to speak, though in a less convincing manner. "You're crazy, Sarah. You can't prove this. It's just something you made up in your head." But he was wrong. I had it all. I not only had the recordings but also the notes I had made over the days. I was ready for this. I didn't let him interrupt. "I'm not the one making things up, Tom. I've been documenting things in a way that you can't deny." I took a step forward with the confidence I knew he didn't expect to see. "You can keep trying to manipulate me, but I'm not the easy target you think I am." He tried to react, but the truth was that he knew he was cornered. He couldn't hide behind empty words or his superior posture anymore. He had been caught in his own game and I wasn't going to let him disqualify me again. Lena appeared at that moment, silent but with a supportive look I didn't know I needed so much. She knew what was going on and perhaps had even been waiting for this moment. She approached us, standing firm but without aggression. "Tom, you can try to fool everyone but you won't fool us anymore." Her presence by my side was like a release valve. I knew that, with her, I had support. I wasn't alone anymore. He had no argument left. He knew that if he tried to manipulate the situation or deny it, he would only expose his flaws further. It wouldn't be just me against him anymore. Lena was by my side and the support she gave me was like a shield. Tom was speechless and his last attempt to react was to walk away, muttering something I couldn't understand. He left, defeated, with an expression I would never forget. He knew he had lost, that he wouldn't be able to control the narrative anymore. But inside I felt a sense of triumph. It wasn't about winning an ego battle or proving something to Tom. It was about reclaiming myself, about showing myself that I was capable of facing adversity, of not letting anyone define my worth. I had faced the biggest obstacle that could exist, the idea that I wasn't good enough, and I had won. What I didn't expect, however, was what would happen next. When the news spread throughout the store, the atmosphere changed. Other employees began to approach me, offering support and solidarity. Some even apologized for not having seen earlier what was going on. It was as if a curtain had been lifted and people could finally see the truth. I wasn't alone, and more importantly, I wasn't the only one who had been targeted by Tom. The exposure of his manipulation not only unmasked him but also strengthened my position in the store. I wasn't just the deaf girl trying to survive in a hostile environment. I was a capable professional, respected by those who truly saw who I was, and that was the greatest victory of all. The days following the confrontation with Tom were a whirlwind. The truth spread like wildfire, and the colleagues who had previously kept their distance now came to me to talk, to offer words of support. I knew that my attitude in the situation had stirred something deeper inside each of them. What seemed like a simple clash of egos had become a matter of integrity. Sarah, the deaf girl whom everyone thought could only be underestimated, was now being seen in a way I had never imagined. Lena was one of the first to approach me after everything. She had always been a quiet observer, but that afternoon she was different. Instead of her usual kind and cautious words, she looked at me with a genuine smile and a gaze full of admiration. "You have no idea how good it was to see that happen. You really stood up to him," she said, with a tone that was not mere congratulations but respect. She was there as she always had been, but this time something in her eyes told me that she saw in me something more than just a coworker. She saw strength. She saw a woman who had finally believed in her own ability. The change wasn't just external. Deep inside, something had transformed. I knew that this victory wasn't about winning a point in a battle of egos. It was about something much deeper. It was about discovering myself. About realizing that my true strength wasn't in the words I said, but in the actions I took. I had finally seen how much I was capable of resisting, fighting, going all the way for what I believed in. I was, in fact, in control of my own life. I started looking at the store and seeing a different environment. It was no longer a place where I felt I had to hide or apologize for being who I was. It was a place where I could breathe, where the truth had finally been heard. Every step I took in that space now felt more secure. The respect from my colleagues wasn't something I had to earn. It was already there. What I needed to do now was to keep standing firm, reaffirming myself every day. Tom, on the other hand, disappeared. Not literally, but his behavior and manipulations vanished. The authorities approached him, and what I didn't know was that he was being investigated for other complaints. In the end, his name was removed from the company and the store felt lighter. Justice in that case wasn't just about what he did to me. It was about everyone he had tried to diminish, manipulate, and control, and now, finally, he was out of the way. What remained for me, however, wasn't the feeling of revenge. It wasn't the satisfaction of seeing what happened to him. What remained was the sense that, finally, I had taken the step I had always needed. I allowed myself for the first time to be seen. Not as the deaf girl, but as the competent professional, the woman who knew her worth and wouldn't be diminished by anyone. That night as I left work, I walked through the streets lit by the soft glow of street lamps, breathing deeply. The city was quiet, but inside me I felt a vibrant change. I was at peace. Not because the world around me was perfect, but because I had conquered the inner peace that once seemed so distant. Back at my apartment as I prepared for bed, I reflected on everything that had happened. What had really changed wasn't the external circumstances, but me. I had overcome the fear of confrontation, the insecurity of exposing myself, and the shame of being who I am. I was no longer a hostage to others' expectations. I had learned to stand my ground. And that, in itself, was already a great victory. That day, for the first time, I felt I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I didn't need to hide behind labels or limitations that others had placed on me. I was enough. And when I woke up the next day, I knew I wasn't just ready to move forward, but to embrace each new challenge with the confidence of someone who had already won one of life's greatest internal battles. Sometimes the battles we face aren't in the world around us but within ourselves. Overcoming our own insecurities, believing in ourselves when no one else does, and having the courage to stand up in the face of adversity are the greatest victories we can achieve. Life constantly challenges us, and each of us carries our own struggles. But true victory isn't in defeating others. It's in learning to overcome ourselves, to affirm ourselves, to respect ourselves. And by doing so, the world around us begins to reflect that transformation. Today I see life differently. I know I'm not alone in my struggles, and I know that, in the end, the only person who needs to believe in me is myself. And that is enough.